In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take data like our data on willingness to pay for tender steaks and make a histogram out of it. So before getting into the histogram, when you download the data for this tutorial, it should look like this. And what these data represent are the value people place on a tender steak relative to a regular steak. For instance, this person in observation 3 has a value or willingness to pay of 2, meaning they will pay $2 more for a guaranteed tender steak relative to a regular steak. This person in observation 2 won't pay a penny more for a tender steak relative to a regular steak. And these represent maximum values. And so this person in observation 4, those are people who said, I'll pay up to 20 cents more per pound, but not a penny more for the tender steaks. In making a histogram, what we want to do is to create a bar chart that describes the variability of these willingness to pays. For instance, we would want to know what percent of the observations, and there are 58 observations here, what percent of these observations had a willingness to pay of 2, what percent of the observations had a willingness to pay between 0 and 25 cents per pound, what percent of the observations was greater than $6 per pound. And to do that, the first thing we want to do is make something called bins. Bins describe the range of the data that we want to reflect in the histogram. And I've got the bins represented like this. And what these bins mean is when I put 0, I mean, and we want to know the percent of observations less than or equal to 0. And then when 0 is followed by 0.25, it means we also want to know the percent of observations that's greater than 0 but less than or equal to 25 cents per pound. And if you keep going on, we see we also want to know the percent of observations that is greater than 4.75 or less than or equal to 5, and we want to know the percent of observations that's greater than 5. To construct our histogram, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to, at the top menu, we're going to find Insert. We're going to go to Data. So we find Data at the top menu. Then we go all the way to the right and we choose Data Analysis. So again, what we did was Data menu, go to the right, Data Analysis. Now if you don't see Data Analysis up here, you need to install it using Excel add-ins, and there's a separate tutorial on how you do that. We select Data Analysis, and then we want to tell Excel we want to use the histogram tool of the Data Analysis toolbox. And we're going to select OK. And the first thing it's going to ask us for is the input range. These are the data that we're looking at. And I'm going to click this icon, which lets me select my data. Now what I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to do is select the name of the variable. Then I'm going to select all the values of the data underneath the name. Then I'm going to select my bin range. And here what I do is I select this icon and I come over here and find bins. I'm going to select the name, the word bins, the variable value, and all the values underneath it. Once that is done, I'm going to click labels because we did include variable labels when we selected our data. And I'm also going to include cumulative percentage so we can get a cumulative histogram, and chart output because our main objective is getting a bar chart that is a histogram. Now we have everything ready and we're going to select OK. And Excel makes this for us, which is going to be a little hard to read, and I'm going to show you how to make more sense out of it and to make your diagram attractive. The first thing I want to do is, if you look at this histogram, it's really hard to read. Like it says 0 here, 0 and then 10. And what this means is that the number of observations that was 0 or less is 10. And in our data, they can't be less than 0. So there were 10 observations equal to 0. Then 0.25, the 1 means that there was only one observation greater than 0 and less than or equal to 0.25. Now, I don't know about you, but on this x-axis, if I'm doing a histogram, I don't want to see one number. I'm going to want to see an interval. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my original data, and then I'm going to come over here and select this range of bin values. This is a different categorization of bin values that I made specially because I knew I wanted to put it in this chart. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to sheet 2, and then right starting in D2, I'm going to paste it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the x-axis with using these variables, with these values. Instead, I want the x-axis to use these values. So I'm going to come over here to my histogram. I'm going to click the x-axis. Well, actually, let me do this. I'm going to just click the chart somewhere. I'm going to click the whole chart. Then I'm going to right-click on the chart. Then I'm going to select data. And once I do this, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change the horizontal axis labels. I'm going to click Edit, and you can see originally it selected all these values, and instead I'm going to say I want to select all of these values instead. Do that, click OK, and you can see right away that we have now our x-axis contains intervals of data, which makes it much more easy to read. You can see here 0.26 to 0.54. This means there are 4 observations between 25 cents and 50 cents. Okay. Next, we've got frequencies here, like 10 observations, 4 observations, but I think it's much easier to look at the percent of observations that fall in a range. And so to do that, I want to take these frequencies and convert them to percentages and use percentages. Now, if you go back and look at the data, you'll see that there are 58 observations. And so what I'm going to do is right here, I'm going to change that frequency to percentage by going equals that number divided by 58. Then I'm going to copy and paste that all the way down. I like seeing these as percentages, so I'm going to go Home, Number, and click this percentage button. I'm going to also ask it to use 2 decimal places. And then I want to put these as the y-axis values in my chart. So I'm going to go back to my histogram, right click on it, select data, and instead of frequency, I want to edit this. My series name is not going to be frequency, it's percentage. Or maybe just percent. For my series values, you can see it had selected all of these. I'm going to select these instead. And while I'm here, I'm going to change this name of cumulative percent. I want to change it to just to be consistent, sorry. Now our histogram is already easier to read. We can see here that between 76 cents and $1, about 7% of the observations was in that range. Now we've got a readable histogram. We just need to do a little more of this histogram to make it more attractive. And I'm going to real quickly show you what I do to a histogram to make it more attractive. This is partly my taste. First thing I want to do is, this says bins. The average person reading a histogram is not going to know what bins means. So I'm going to place bins with willingness to pay. over here, this y-axis no longer refers to frequency, so I'm going to change it to %. And then I'm going to give my histogram a better name. And what this histogram is histogram This is a long title, so I'm going to have to make the font smaller. I'll do that by selecting it all, coming over here. Let's try a 12 font. That's a little too small. 14 font. I like that. Okay. Now, okay, this is looking better. Something else I like to do, I like to move this legend down underneath the chart because I think it frees up more room, makes it easier to read. So I'm going to, you notice I selected this legend here. I'm going to right click, format legend. I'm going to ask to put it on the bottom. And then, another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to change this word % to histogram, and, well, no, that's okay. It's okay as it is. Well, everything looks pretty good. All the x-axis labels have a easy to read identifier. We know what each axis represents. We have a good title. The only thing I don't like so far is we don't really know what this y-axis is, do we? So I want to, just like this y-axis has a label, I want to give this y-axis a label. So I think we do this by, I'm going to select the chart. I'm going to come up to Chart Tools and choose Layout. I'm going to choose Axis Titles, Secondary Vertical Axis, Rotated Title. And then I'm going to change the wording. This is cumulative percentage. Another thing I like to do, this y-axis, there's no reason to have it go up to 120% because we can't exceed 100%. So I'm going to right click. Notice I chose the whole y-axis. I'm going to right click, format axis, maximum, I want it fixed instead of 1.2, I'm going to change it to 1. Good. Another thing you may want to do, if you want grid lines in here to help people figure out the values for the height of a bar, you can do that by, I've selected my chart, I go up here to layout, then I go over here to grid lines, and let's say primary horizontal grid lines. Okay, good. I like this. I think this is a nice chart. If you want to add notes to the chart down here to help people read it, what you might want to do is go over here to Insert, Text Box. Make your text box here, Notes, and then just write whatever you want. Oh, and by the way, one thing to do to make sure that you've done everything right, these percentages for your new histogram, they should all sum to 100%. So when I select all these, and then when I look in the bottom right hand side of Excel, it gives me the statistics. Yes, the sum is 100%. So looks like we did everything nice here.